Tesh Dile and welcome to Tibet This Week. This is Sakina Bhatt with another edition of Weekly News on Tibet, His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Central Tibetan Administration. Let's look at the headlines first. There is certainly no doubt that I would live for over 100 years, says His Holiness the Dalai Lama at Tenshuk Dharamshala. His Holiness the Dalai Lama, CTA President Dr. Lobsang Singye and Speaker of Tibetan Parliament in Exile Pema Jungne congratulates Australian Prime Minister. President Dr. Singye unveils 50 feet Tathagat Buddha statue in Aurangabad. Senator No of Canada moves a motion on Tibet, urges Sino-Tibet dialogue based on middle way approach. Portuguese Parliament calls for release of the 11th Panchen Lama. Photos of 2012 Tibetan self-immolators identified. Final selection for Tibetan Scholarship Program 2020 underway. Tibetans across the globe led by CTA expressed their faith and prayers for His Holiness the Dalai Lama's long life and good health by offering Tenshuk, which is a long life prayers at Zuglakhang in Dharamshala on Friday last week. Expressing his gratitude, His Holiness once again reaffirmed to live more than 100 years to serve humanity and specially for the benefit of Tibetan people and the cause. His Holiness affirmed that the prayers offered for his long life and the blessings endured on him are indeed sincere, and therefore it's likely that those prayers will prove their benefits. Even now, when I am 84 years old, I am still very much healthy, so I think there is certainly no doubt that I would live for over 110 years. I only need to relax and have a quality time now, affirmed His Holiness the Dalai Lama. The Tenshuk offering is also being observed for the pacification of all obstacles of this 84th year of His Holiness's life and for the fulfillment of his benevolent wishes. His Holiness the Dalai Lama, CTA President Dr. Lobsang Singye and Speaker of Tibetan Parliament in Exile Pema Jungne congratulated the Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison on his coalition party's victory in Australia's parliamentary elections. In his congratulatory letter, His Holiness wrote, "I take this opportunity to express my deep gratitude to the Australian people for the interest and concern for the present situation of the Tibetan people." Congratulating the Prime Minister on behalf of CTA, President Dr. Lobsang Singye said, "I would like to take this opportunity to express a profound gratitude to the people and the Government of Australia for your exemplary support in hoisting over 2,300 Tibetans, out of which over 1,000 are former Tibetan political prisoners." On behalf of Tibetan Parliament in Exile and Tibetans in and outside Tibet, Speaker Pema Jungne wished the Prime Minister by expressing his deepest gratitude to the Australian government and the people for their exemplary support in hosting former Tibetan political prisoners from Tibet and for showing concern to the cause of Tibet. I look forward to your continued support regarding the worsening human rights situation inside Tibet so as to resolve the issue of Tibet soon. Prime Minister Morrison's Liberal National Coalition Party has won ahead with 74 seats with the opposition Labour Party on just 66 seats. PM Morrison will continue to hold the office he assumed in August 2018. CTA President Dr. Lobsang Singye attended the inauguration ceremony of a 50-feet statue of Tathagat Buddha at the invitation of Lakutara Mahaviraha Bhikkhu Training Center in Aurangabad, Maharashtra on Friday last week. Addressing the gathering as the chief guest of the event, Dr. Singye said, "Buddhism, which originated from India and spreading to the rest of the world, is the greatest gift India has given to the world," and said, "Tibet and India share a deep and unique cultural and spiritual heritage bond." Despite China's brutal and systematic attempt to wipe out Buddhism in Tibet, it however didn't succeed, and Buddhism is now being preserved very well by Tibetans in exile and in the Himalayan region under the guidance of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. In fact, China is now the largest Buddhist country with over 300 million following the faith.
औरंगाबाद में इतने बुद्धिस्ट लोग हैं, हम भी बुद्धिस्ट, तिब्बती लोग भी बुद्धिस्ट हैं, हम साथ मिलके एक परिवार की तरफ से बुद्ध धर्म को मानना चाहिए।
Dr. Singye arrived in Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport on Wednesday this week, and he is scheduled to meet government officials during the visit. Canada's Conservative Party Senator Honourable Tan Hai No moved a motion in the Senate to raise awareness of the serious and recurring human rights abuses in Tibet and to urge the Government of Canada to take stronger action with China in support of genuine autonomy for Tibet. Expressing his concern at the Senate debate upon the restrictions imposed on the Tibetans in Tibet, Senator No affirmed,
"Deeply distraught by the fact that the human rights situation in Tibet has not improved. The fundamental rights and freedoms that we have been granted and continue to protect here in Canada, including freedom of expression, religion, movement, and conscience, are severely restricted and increasingly repressive in the Tibetan Autonomous Region, or TAR, and Greater Tibet. The Tibetan people are subjected to these restrictions at the hand of the Chinese Communist Party and continue to suffer because of this. We, as parliamentarians, cannot stand idle on this issue. The time has come for the Government of Canada to do more. Today, I come stand before you with a motion to urge the Government of Canada to actively support the genuine autonomy of Tibet.
especially at a time when the Canadian government is increasingly focused on strengthening its trade and economic ties with China. Senator No stressed that China must remember to voice its concerns about violations of the fundamental rights and freedoms of Tibetans with the Chinese authorities at high-level meetings and in bilateral and multilateral statements. The Assembly of the Republic of Portugal on Tuesday condemned the forced disappearance of the world's youngest political prisoner, the 11th Panchen Lama, and urged the Portuguese government to appeal to the Chinese government for his release. Called a vow of condemnation and preoccupation with regards to the 11th Panchen Lama, the text was presented to the Parliament by Mr. Silva, a Tibet supporter of People Animals Nature Party, and was adopted with 29 votes in favour and 19 against. The advisory assumed a conviction vote and concern for the 24 years of forced disappearance of the Gendon Chuki Nima, which was presented by the PAN, which is the People's Animals Nature Party. The PAN stated, China has justified its disappearance, claiming that it was for its own protection against separatist forces. For more than 2 decades, the Chinese government has refused requests from UN human rights experts and governments access to Gendon Chuki Nima and his family to check their health and well-being. The UN, EU and Human Rights Desk of DIIR marks 24th year of the disappearance of Panchen Lama with a panel discussion at Dharamshala on Friday last week. The expert panel includes officiating President Kaloi Venerable Karma Gelek Yuthok, Kachin Kunchok Tenzing of Tashi Lumpo Monastery, Tsiring Tsomo, Director of Tibetan Center for Human Rights and Democracy, and Thupten Sampel, former Director of Tibet Policy Institute of CTA. The panelists dwelled upon the significance of the Panchen Lama title, Panchen Lama's relation with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, their reincarnation, Panchen Lama's disappearance, etc. On 17th May 1995, the Chinese government abducted a 6-year-old boy, Gendon Chuki Nima, just days after he was declared as 11th Panchen Lama, one of the most senior figures in Tibetan Buddhism. Despite repeated calls for China to account for the safety and whereabouts of Gendon and his family, China reported in the 1990s only that he was under the protection of the government. Since then, there have been no information provided about him. 3 Tibetans who had self-immolated in 2012 protesting against Chinese rule and the policies in Tibet have now been identified with their photographs. Although details of the 3 self-immolators were received and recorded in the same year, their photographs became available only years later. All 3 died on site after the immolation protest, calling for the freedom in Tibet and the return of His Holiness the Dalai Lama to Tibet. The final interview selection for Tibetan Scholarship Program was held at Central Tibetan Administration in Dharamshala on Tuesday this week. Out of 31 candidates, only 6 were selected for the TSP 2020. The objective of the TSP is to provide and enhance an administrative infrastructure for the Tibetan refugee community. The Tibetan Scholarship Program is administered by the U.S. Department of State through a cooperative agreement with the Tibet Fund, a non-profit New York-based educational and cultural institution. The program was inaugurated in 1988, benefiting over 450 Tibetans so far.
I've been selected in the Tibetan scholarship program to pursue a further program in MBA. So TSB really gives me an opportunity to study MBA in one of the top colleges in the United States. So after the 2 years MBA program, I'm committed and determined to come back to continue serving in the Central Tibetan Administration with more enhanced knowledge, skill, exposure and learnings and experience, and contribute to the various programs of CTA upon my return.
I feel very fortunate to have been selected for the Tibetan Scholarship Program 2020. Through this program, I hope that I will be able to enhance my study knowledges that I have gained from my undergraduate studies, and with this opportunity, I hope that I will be able to contribute more effectively for the projects that I have been working at the CTA for the last 3 years.
That's all for this week's edition of Tibet This Week. See you next time and have a great weekend.